This week, on an episode of Tinkerer's Toolbox, we're talking about Sword and Sorcery. What is it? How do you do it in 5e? And is it even possible? Welcome to We Speak Common. Hello, and welcome to the D&D podcast for everyone, because here we speak common. This is the D&D podcast brought to you in partnership with the Dice Dungeon, where you can get some very nice premium-made D&D dice with 10% off if you use the code We Speak Common at checkout, or follow the link in the description below. It's also brought to you thanks to some very wonderful people who support this show on Patreon. If you want to jump in and get involved with that and see what kind of goodies you can get by getting involved, there is also a link in the description below. This is the very first episode of Tinkerer's Toolbox, and I am lovingly joined by my over-the-seas friend, Ray. Hello, Ray. How you doing?
How's it going, Ben? I'm doing well. It's a little early here, but other than that, everything's great.
Dragged you out of bed massively early. And even so, even though I thought I was prepared, I've had all number of issues today. So that's fun. I just hope there's a podcast at the end of this. That would be like the cherry on top, you know?
If anything, it could be like a how not to video, you know?
Yeah, except there wouldn't be any video. Because that would be like the icing on top, just everything not working. So yeah, we'll slowly but surely struggle along. I just hope I can fix everything before we play D&D tomorrow.
That's what I'm really concerned about.
Yeah, that's the big issue, not the podcast.
I don't think I could survive another week without finding out what happens next.
Oh, my friend, we will be there eventually. There will definitely be a time where we have to have like a good two-week break. Or longer. We have teachers in our group.
That's true. That's a good point. People will want vacations and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where are you going right now in this world that we live in?
I mean, there's lots of places that you could go to that are like fairly remote, at least in the States. Like,
yeah, I suppose you've got different rules to us, haven't you?
Yeah, well, we're not locked down, for one. And then there are lots of kind of locations that don't have a ton of people. Mm-hmm. Or like the one contact that you would have with people is to get into the grocery store to like stock up for the week, and then... Yeah.
Well, we are in full-on lockdown here, and I only go out to work, and that's it. So, so yeah, we're not going anywhere on vacation. So you'll be the one putting us on hold if you want to go away. So don't be selfish, Ray. Let us play D&D.
I'm sorry. I'll just bring my laptop and tell anyone that I'm on vacation with that it's like, no, this is
something I still have to do. Yeah, this is part of vacation.
More important.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
So Tinkerer's Toolbox today then is it is a brand new show that is all about the game side of D&D. I guess is the best, most like loose way to describe it. So mechanics, rule building, classes, character building, encounters, you know, all that good stuff that is actually the game of D&D. And we had a really good topic suggestion on the We Speak Common Discord, which you can get by being a Patreon member. There's a lovely little community on there. Ray, you're one of the mods on there.
That's correct.
We had James on last week. We're doing like a Meet the Mod team right now. So we had James on last week. We got you on this week. And really quickly, what is your favourite part of the Discord? Go. Put you on the spot.
My favourite part of the Discord? I really do like the suggestions. That's like the crispest pieces of goodness for me.
Nice.
Like, before you asked me to do the topic that we're doing today, I saw it, and I was like, that's a really good topic.
Yeah, it's a really good one. Yeah. Yeah. I've pulled it up. So this is a topic by Chairface. That's their Discord name. I do not know your first name.
For a period of time, they were the patron, right?
Yes.
They stumbled upon the Patreon before anyone was supposed to know about it.
Yeah, before I'd launched it officially. And they joined like 4 or 5 days before. And I was like, oh,
yep.
Hello.
They jumped in and we all were like,
there's nothing here.
How did you get here?
Yeah. Well, just ignore the man behind the curtain.
Right.
But yeah, so they popped in a really nice suggestion. Now, obviously, you can send suggestions for the show anywhere. Twitter, by email, but on Reddit, if you find me, it's usually me talking about the podcast. But if you are on the Discord, there is a specific channel for it, which is the first place I will go to look. So this is a really great one. This is low fantasy, brackets, sword and sorcery in 5e. So Chef Ace has said, would it even work well in 5e? Would a level cap be needed to maintain the sword and sorcery tone? If it's Conan-esque, then what species would be limited, and how would you maintain variety between players? So there's a load of stuff here, and I think, to be honest, I just want to talk about sword and sorcery in a whole in this episode, because I think it's something we haven't really touched on before. Back when Joe was on the show with me, we did talk about some lower fantasy settings, but we never really jumped into like how it works and the rules and things. So that's kind of the whole point of today's episode. I think the best place to start is defining sword and sorcery. Would you agree?
Yes, okay. And it's going to be challenging.
It really is. So I did a little like Google define sword and sorcery search, and it was like, it's fantasy and there's romance. I was like, great. Thanks.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate just about the genre itself, where you have a problem where sword and sorcery is useful for discussion, like what we're having right now, but the genres kind of like blend together. There's definitely like a gray area in between sword and sorcery and high fantasy and a bunch of other genres. And the sword and sorcery purists, if you were to take something that looks like sword and sorcery and put it next to like high fantasy, you'd be like, that's sword and sorcery. They would be like, no, that's not sword and sorcery. Mm-hmm. So we got to be very careful not to upset the people out there.
So for me then, jumping in, willing to upset some people. My opinion of sword and sorcery, my image of it is just very low fantasy. So when I think sword and sorcery, I think your typical swords and shields, warriors, knights, like the stuff you would find in D&D, but magic is very rare. It doesn't come up often, and when it does, it's not explained. Like if I were reading a sword and sorcery novel, like it would be a low magic system. It's not an explained kind of hard magic system. So like Gandalf in the Lord of the Rings, his magic is never really explained in the core books. Like obviously if you go out and explore the extra stuff it is, but as is in Lord of the Rings, he kind of just does some magic and you shall not pass and that's it kind of thing.
Yeah, so Lord of the Rings is very high fantasy.
Yeah, see, this is where
if we're talking genre, yeah. So that's actually the difference between a hard magic system and a soft magic system. Yeah. So not all soft magic systems are sword and sorcery magic systems.
So what's your definition of sword and sorcery then? Correct me.
So the best thing that I was able to like scrap together through the limited searching that I did as well is that sword and sorcery is more so a tone of adventure. It's not based in mechanics, and that's why so many people haven't really done a like how do you achieve sword and sorcery in Dungeons and Dragons. So it's a tone. So what that means is your magic is is a soft magic system. So like you said, like the Chairface said in our Patreon, he asked specifically, do you need a level cap? Are certain classes off limits, right? Because if you have a wizard in your party, the whole point of a wizard is that they understand what they're doing with magic. Yeah. It's like math for them. That is something that does not exist traditionally in sword and sorcery. Yeah. All of your magic is kind of like voodoo-esque, dark. Like typically speaking, anyone who performs magic is a bad guy. Right, okay. Because it's like evil like that. You can't get magic unless you've made a deal with or like worship some evil entity.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the thing, I think, and this is why we say we're probably going to be quite controversial today, because to make it work, you're going to have to break those rules. Like, just hands down, there's no way you're not going to not break those rules. So I think we need to define what sword and sorcery would be inside D&D, and it's not going to be exactly right, because it can't be. I would say then, for D&D Sword and Sorcery, we'd have a low magic world where the players are probably the most amount of magic that any NPC has seen in a long time, if we want to keep all of the classes in. And well, I think we get to races and things after that. Let's start with magic. Let's bite-size it. Let's make it easy. So the big thing then for me is, first and foremost, D&D is a big collaborative experience. If you're going to do this, do the party want to play a Sword and Sorcery style game? Yeah.
That's 100% correct, right? So in every game of Dungeons and Dragons, you need to be willing to tell your players no.
Yeah.
Right. Even that's a controversial subject, but we all do it, right? So if someone came to your table and said, "Hey, I'm not interested in any of the classes in the player's handbook. I want to be a Spartan from Halo."
Yeah.
you might say, "Yeah, I'm going to say no." So we're all already saying no in our games. I think that what is controversial is when you start saying no to things that are in the player's handbook. So to achieve that like low magic, you're probably going to want to, if you want to keep it easy and say as few no's as possible, like stay to the lower levels, I'd say.
Yeah. So I think, the one thing I can foresee being the issue is that you want to set your whole campaign in that Sword and Sorcery feel. I think traditionally with D&D, especially when you get to those higher levels, obviously we've got the tiers of play. Once you get to sort of that 5th level, you're kind of going into being heroes, and then it's like, then you're Savers of the Realm, and then you're like in that god tier kind of ridiculous powerful. And I think if you want to run a Sword and Sorcery campaign, you need to, first of all, have your Sword and Sorcery homebrew world, or have your version of the Forgotten Realms that is Sword and Sorcery, or however you're doing it, because you could do it anywhere, it's just a tone at this point. Start at level 1, but then when you get to level 5, and you really start, those 3rd level spells for wizards and things, and those paladin smites and stuff, if you're using those classes, it's at 5th level when you start going, okay, now we're getting into the higher fantasy kind of god level stuff, rather than waiting until you get to 13th or 15th or 14th level, because it's going to come in that much quicker.
Definitely. Yeah, like I think it's all, if you want to play a Sword and Sorcery campaign, like you alluded to right at the beginning, it's all about expectation setting. So your expectation setting is, hey, when you're paging through the player's handbook and deciding what class you want to play, don't look at any of the abilities past 6th level. Like 5th level is our 20th level in this campaign setting, and once we kill the final bad guy at 5th level, that's when we're retiring characters, and if we want to play in this world again, that's where we pick up with new characters.
So I think with that then, and I think there'll be a lot of people who'll go, oh, well, I don't want to play a campaign that's only 1 to 5th level. But I think if you want to play a Sword and Sorcery campaign, that's how you're going to get that vibe, because we all know that 1st to 3rd level can be very, very hardcore. Like, it's so easy to go down in those levels and just drop and lose a PC.
Yeah.
But also there's that thing of like, oh, well, I can't fight many creatures in that level because they're all like goblins or kobolds, or you gain 300 XP and you very quickly level up, like within a first session you're at level 2. So it's then all about changing those hurdles. Run it milestone, or just rewrite the XP levels for yourself, like the boundaries. And work out, okay, I want to run Sword and Sorcery and I want them to be fighting people, because people are the scariest monsters in the world, like that's the theme you're going for. Great, there's loads of NPCs that go up against those levels that are humanoid, humans, elves, dwarfs, if you're using them. If you want to use creatures that are, I don't know, let's say you want to put your characters up against a froghemoth in a Sword and Sorcery game at 3rd level, because it's like they've got to the point where they've begun to explore the world of the dark magic, or however you're running it. Take that froghemoth stat block and just pull it down. Less HP, less actions. Downgrade the damage dice. Like, these are all things you can do to make sure that you still have access to everything inside the monster manual and inside things like Volos and Mordenkainen's to go big, but small. That's an oxymoron, but you kind of get where I'm coming from, yeah?
Absolutely. I would say that a common misconception that you would probably get from someone. So say someone were to come up to you and say, I prefer Sword and Sorcery D&D. The misconception that you could pull off of that person is, oh, they like playing low-level D&D.
Yeah.
That is wrong, right? Like, I would not recommend Sword and Sorcery for an inexperienced group, Dungeon Master and also players, because you're going to need to be doing so much prep, so much work to maintain the gritty tone and feeling. You won't be able to fall back on the players pining for their next level up because you're going to need to slow down the pace of level ups. You're going to need to play a much more
gritty,
careful. What was that? Yeah, it's going to need to
yeah.
be gritty. It's going to need to be crunchy. The players are going to need to have more than just their abilities to keep them engaged in the game. They need to be like really excited about how their characters are interacting with the world because they're not getting awesome, crazy abilities as frequently.
Yeah, for sure. And I think
that,
I mean, it's a D&D podcast, so I shouldn't say maybe D&D is not the system for you, but I know that there probably are other systems out there that will do this a lot better, but there's a lot of time and commitment taken to read all the rules to run a new system, let alone bring a whole new group in. So if you're trying to do it in a system you already know, I mean, look at, for example, the Star Wars 5e conversion that's free and exists online. Like, if 5e is the game you know how to run and you don't have the time to learn a new one, systems and reskins like that are the way to go. So, looking at Chairface's question about making character classes off limits, personally, I don't like that idea because I don't really want to limit. And as you said before, you know, that's where you get controversial about saying no to the player's handbook. But if you've got that experienced party and you're thinking, I want to do Sword and Sorcery, but I want to go to level 20, then, I mean, it's going to be a lot more work. I would suggest sticking with martial classes. Maybe look at things like, I think the Rune Knight would be a good example of a good Sword and Sorcery class, because you've got that fighter who has a little bit, a very small amount of magic. Like, oh, I know that in ancient times the giants wrote these symbols on swords and I've learned them, and I know the magic, I don't understand it, but I know that if I write this rune on my sword, I can swing twice as fast. Like, small, very low fantasy kind of bits of magic that you could weave in that still give your players that experience of not just being a fighter.
The higher level you go and you allow in your game, the more specific you're going to be. You're going to have to be about what subclasses are allowed or not allowed, right?
Yeah.
So what comes to mind is the like, all of a sudden you were saying fighters are totally cool for Sword and Sorcery if you're going up to level 5, even Eldritch Knight, because you're only getting first level spells as an Eldritch Knight. Now all of a sudden, if you're going up to 15th level, you need to start cutting things like the Arcane Trickster, the Eldritch Knight, some of the monk classes. You get some like pretty interesting abilities with like if you had like the 4 elements monk that you need to start cutting. You could do it. The thing here is, you on the outset of a Sword and Sorcery game are going to need to be very transparent with your players that you are going to be saying no a whole bunch to maintain tone, because tone is everything in Sword and Sorcery. If I would not recommend playing like a limited rule set without trying to attain that gritty tone, because then you're just playing low magic, and I don't know, that's kind of just less fun.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think if you're just cutting things and you're not maintaining that theme, then what's the point?
Right.
And I think that is why it's so key to have players who want to do Sword and Sorcery, but also know the game and understand why you're cutting those things. And if you've got new players, maybe you've got a new player that comes to you and says, I really want to do, this Conan style game or whatever. Like, this is my idea of what I want to play. And you look at that and you go, oh, that's Sword and Sorcery. Then you need to be able to explain to them either why it won't be like that, or why it will be like that, but things won't be in. And as long as you've got that knowledge and that understanding and you can coherently put that across, you're going to be treading the safe line of understanding how this all works and putting that across to your players. I personally wouldn't want to cut a lot of stuff. So I think I would, if I was going to do this, I'd stick to a 1 to 5 kind of campaign, and maybe, you know, once we've got to that 5th level and we've done that bad guy, come back to it with the characters at higher levels and look at the differences and why it didn't work, and maybe just, you know, you get to the end of the campaign and you just go haul out and have some fun and just continue to play as and expand beyond that tone. Because you can do that. You can have a campaign that starts in Sword and Sorcery, and then, you know, the story at level 5, they unlock the thing that's locking away the magic. You can continue beyond that. You don't have to cut it off and end it there. But what about races and cutting races? Because I feel like, as I do with classes, taking those out takes away a lot of flavour. And I think with races, not just playable character races, but actual races you're interacting with as characters, that really does pull that flavour away. Like, not having elves and dwarves feels the shame to me. I'd have them, but I'd have them limited.
Yeah, I think this is going to be controversial. I think
Go for it. This whole episode is.
I think that you basically pull out all of the races that aren't human.
Oof.
And I agree with you that all of the races add flavor, but I think what we're talking about here is if this is something you're going for and you're taking the time to talk to your players about what you're trying to achieve with tone, like, go all the way. Don't go halfway, because then you could have just played high fantasy. Like, if you want to play Sword and Sorcery, like, do everything within your power to attain that tone. If there's a player who wanted to play an elf or a dwarf and, like, that's their thing and they really want to do it, already you shouldn't play Sword and Sorcery.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, in my opinion, like, that's already a sign where after you've had this conversation about the tone you're trying to achieve, and that player can only have their fun if they're playing that specific race, that there's nothing wrong with that player at all. It just means that your group is not ready to play in this genre yet, because the rest of the campaign is going to be about saying no. So if your players can't say no or take a no in the beginning, that's a sign.
Yeah, that
okay,
maybe it's not right.
Let's play. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think, and look at it this way, it's the same as if you went to a group and you said, I really want to run a game in Ravnica, and you explained Ravnica to your players, and they said, oh, I don't really want to do city exploring, I want to do wilderness tracking. Well, then Ravnica's not right for you at that point. You might come to a point, you know, after that campaign where they say, yeah, we've done a lot of wilderness exploring, I want to do city now, and then you go, okay, let's do Ravnica. Same with Sword and Sorcery. You might do the high fantasy, they've done their elf, they've had their player fantasy, now they go, yeah, let's try that, let's give it a go. I would say, like, for me, if I was going that route and I was cutting all of those races, I would still want to put in, like, one elf NPC, so that you can have that moment where they're like, oh my god, we've experienced that small amount of magic that exists in the world.
You should absolutely have those races exist somewhere in the world, but as soon as one of your players is one of them,
it becomes norm.
It becomes normal, right? Like, and you would say, but it's just one elf. Everybody else can be a human. Your players are spending 100% of their time with that elf. Like, elves are normal if there's even one in the party.
There'll be no surprise to then finding that one elf that lives in the evergreen forest. And what a cliche elf forest name, the Evergreen. God. I promise I'm more creative than that.
the Nevergreen forest.
Because the magic is evil.
Right.
But yeah, and, like, I think that's the same with goblins. I think the one thing that, like, Sword and Sorcery does is make low level creatures more exotic, because you can have all of those first to third level, or first to third doesn't really work here because we're expanding the milestones, but first to second level adventures being fighting humans and, like, dealing with the tax man, you know, taking from the poor, and, you know, the murderer that's harrowing against the village. And then at level 2 there's, like, a sighting of this hideous creature, and you describe it as a monster, and it's like, God, we've not had monsters. Like, monsters don't exist. It's just fairy tale. Maybe it's just another raid of bandits out on the highway. But the characters go and explore, and it turns out to be this grotesque, dark green skinned little humanoid thing with sharp fingernails. Like, think Goblin Slayer, like the anime. Like, they make them scary, and then when you fight them at level 2, it actually is this big experience. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and it sounds awesome to me. It's something that I want to do. I just think that you need to be very ready for it. It's not something that you can pitch to your players and be like, and they show up for their first game of Dungeons and Dragons. You're like, this is what we're doing, because it's not for everybody, especially if you're someone who's never played Dungeons and Dragons before. You read through the player handbook, you're like, this is so cool. Yeah. Everybody in their first time reading through the player's handbook is like, I'm going to get to level 20, I'm going to be a paladin, and then I'm going to become an angel of death and murder a bunch of people. Yeah. And as a DM who's experienced and as a player who's experienced, you're sitting there going like, we're never going to get to level 20.
It's not going to happen. Yeah, it's just not going to happen.
But you don't want to crush that fantasy for that player, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. But I think taking those, if you really take the small parts and make them something big and fun and scary and interesting, and you can shape the way the world views those things. So it's not just goblins, or it's not just kobolds. Like, how interesting would that be to experience? But then think of it on another level as well. What if they get to 5th level and you want to continue on and change the tone a little bit and open up the magic a bit more, and they've heard tell of a dragon? Like, how much more scary and impactful does a very iconic and normal to experience creature become with that kind of lens over your eye? It opens up a lot of possibilities.
Definitely. I mean, in my place where I am right now in my D&D career, killing dragons are like, it's like a scout badge for me. Yeah. You know, it's like, oh, okay, I got my adult green dragon here. Yeah. This is from when I killed that young blue dragon. Adult red dragon, that one was tough. You know, it's like, it's not like a dragon fight isn't a big deal anymore. So it's to capture that again for really experienced players. This is how you do it, right?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of option. And I think there's a lot of like fun stuff that gets opened up with taking on this tone. But there is one thing that never changes with all D&D and with all tones and campaigns, and that is, Ray, that you need some really, really good dice to roll up those characters and to run those encounters. And I don't know if you know this, being someone... Did you like that? Was that... Did you enjoy that?
I wasn't ready for that at all.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting better at hiding it. I don't know if you know this, being overseas in the land of the US and the A, but there's this really great company here in the UK that ship worldwide, and I think even over to the US. Is that right, Ray?
I do indeed own a set of Gaius the Green.
Oh, wonderful. I have them somewhere. They're hidden away behind my books. How are they for you? How have you found your Dice Dungeon dice?
Let me tell you, Ben, they are exquisite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
They just roll better than other dice. I think that they're weighted.
Whoa, hang on. Hang on.
No.
Let's not put any of those rumors out.
I got carried away. I got pulled into it. They'll never let me do another endorsement again.
No, never ever. They are some really, really good dice.
Slander.
It's what is it? It's heathenous. Blasphemy.
Indeed, blasphemy. I'll be excommunicated from the Patreon.
Yeah. You'll be kicked off the Discord server. You're no longer a mod.
Exactly.
It started well for you, but you know, what are you going to do? Apply for the mod position. It's open now. But no, Dice Dungeon have some wonderful dice, some really, really nice ones, including, so the Gaius the Green set that you've got are part of a 4 set, and the Corinne the Golden are the set that Joe and I named, and someone
that is correct.
Did purchase a set the other day using the We Speak Common code, which gets you 10% off. It's just We Speak Common when you check out, and that set is actually my favourite set. It is right here. I feel bad saying it's my favourite because I love them all. But yeah, they're really nice. They come in a really nice tin, and they are actually always changing things. So I have 2 different types of this tin now, right? Because I'm a fanatic. And I also have on order a set of the really nice Shadowfell plain resin dice, which Ben is sending my way soon, which are gorgeous, and I want to put them on display. So go and have a look at the website, have a look around, get some really nice dice, use the code to get 10% off and support the show. And they even ship to the US. Ray, how long did it take to get your dice, do you think, on average?
I can't remember. I kind of like set it and forget it, but it wasn't as long as I was expecting it to be. I don't think it was longer than 2 weeks.
Oh, well, that's
which,
good.
like, is pretty good.
That's really good, especially with the UK going through its whole weird EU leaving stuff. I mean, we've left, but like nothing's sorted. It's a mess over here.
I just imagine that everything's on fire.
It is
by you guys,
mate. Yeah. Don't go to Dover. The ports that are there, they're just burning down. It's awful.
Right.
I genuinely think we are a few months away from just getting out the old man of war galleys and just doing it the old British Empire style.
Exactly.
It's a mess. But yeah, it doesn't stop dice getting out to you. So, and that code works everywhere. It's not just UK. So, get some Dice Dungeon dice, guys. Do it. Buy them all. Every set, all of them.
There's a few of them now, or a bunch of them now. So that'd be tough to do.
I don't think we're allowed to talk about it, but I don't know if you've seen the behind the scenes stuff that Ben's been putting up on the Discord server.
I have, yes. I'm
very excited about that. Hey, if you're on the Patreon, you get a load of behind the scenes stuff from Dice Dungeon too. Just saying. So yeah, go and check that out. Go and check out their website and keep an eye out for new things. So Sword and Sorcery. Let's get back into it. I'm having too much fun talking about the Dice Dungeon. I want to talk about very specifically then what that, if we're doing it 1 to 5, let's stick with that theme, what that campaign would look like. What kind of story do we tell in Sword and Sorcery that is different from normal D&D? Especially if you've never really jumped into it much. How do we plan that out? Because for me, it's, and I know I'm ringing that old bell, it's all about pacing. It's all about working out where those levels come in, where your big bad really steps up, because all of that changes if you're just running 1 to 5. All of it.
Definitely.
And for me, someone who loves magic, I mean, I always play a wizard. I want there to be that magic, but I want it to be a very quiet undertone all the way through until that point where, okay, here's the magic. Or you've experienced that one elf, or you found that one dwarf blacksmith in this city, or you finally found out the big bad is trying to resurrect his wife and in so is unleashing a curse across the land. Like, that kind of stuff. Like, I want there to be that climactic, you shall not pass moment. You experience the magic, and then it goes away again. Yeah. What do you think?
So,
go for it.
I have a few thoughts. So, Sword and Sorcery as a genre, like a part of Sword and Sorcery is that the stories are shorter, which is kind of interesting. They're novellas typically, where you don't get all that much character introspection. So if you wanted to really graft the kind of the literature onto your D&D world, then that probably means that your pacing doesn't actually have to be all that slow. You could probably, it would be like a level 1 to 5 adventure rather than a level 1 to 5 campaign, and you would just be signed up for the idea that this is going to be a shorter campaign. It's going to be short, sweet, well, like parceled up,
which is quite nice as well, because like you can do Lost Mines, the start set 1 to 5 in like 5 or 6 sessions.
Yep.
That's a really nice little bite-sized game of D&D, and one would say maybe perfect for, like, I don't know, a podcast that wanted to do some actual play in short form.
You could say that. One might say.
So that's given me ideas. But I think that's nice. That's a nice way of looking at it. That's a really nice way of doing it. And I think if you look at it that way, you can still have that character development. It's just not going to be the nice, neatly tied up bow. So maybe when you're making your Sword and Sorcery characters, or you're working with your party for them to make their characters, you say, give me an idea of their history already. Yeah, you're level 1, but what have they been doing because they've been living in this world? And think about where they will go back to and what their lives might look like in the future before this adventure happens and then after it. Because then you can keep bringing these characters back in as well with different adventures. Like, yeah, okay, the worst thing to do is to ask your players to take a character and de-level them for another campaign. But you could do it.
Oh.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you could do it. Or you could just have an adventure that's a whole adventure, maybe 3 sessions that's level 1, and then a whole adventure that's level 2. And elongate it that way if you didn't want to tell them to de-level. Because I would do that as a player if I was trying to go for this theme. I'd be down for that.
Definitely. I think that any player would be down if they had played enough anywhere like levels between 5 to 15, because then they know that they're not missing out really. Like, because until you've played those levels, you can't wait to get to them.
Yeah.
You're like D&D will be just that much better
when I'm all powerful. Yeah.
Right. Right, and that's definitely a thing. That's the way that I felt until I played at that tier, and then I was like, it's harder to tell a compelling story at that level because you're so worried about all your options. You have so many options
and the balancing as well,
and the balancing that the game becomes ungrounded, right? Like you have to worry so much more about the mechanics that you start to worry less and less about the story. So I think that most experienced players would be excited by kind of the idea of a challenge. And if you're someone who knows a bunch about the mechanics about D&D, it's hard to convince yourself to play a non-spellcaster.
Yeah, yes.
Because you just know that they're
just top tier all the way around.
They're just better, particularly at the higher levels. But if you take a look at everyone at the table and say, hey, we're all going to do sword and sorcery. Now all of a sudden it's like, okay, I don't have to worry about being under effective by choosing the fighter.
And I think as well, this is the kind of game where character builds just don't matter. Like, you just don't need to think about it. You just have fun. Just pick a base class and go with it. Oh, he disagrees.
I think they matter even more.
Really?
You're playing some lethal D&D at first
that's
and second
the thing.
level.
I love lethal D&D. I thrive on that stuff. And I think, give me a base class that can die.
Me too, but so if we're talking about not worrying about builds, where are you putting that -2 modifier that you happen to roll, or that -1 modifier? Not in your Constitution score.
Yeah, that's true.
You need every single hit point that you can get your hands on at those levels.
I suppose, but I think what I mean then, if I jump back into what I was saying, is that when I think about building a character, like a character build, my brain goes to that place where they say, oh, I'm going to be this multi-class into this, and it really comes online at this level. Like, that stuff goes out the window. That stuff doesn't matter.
Yes.
Unless you know that your build comes online. I hate that phrase. I just hate that phrase. It's just something in me doesn't like it. If you know that it comes online at level 2, then fantastic, go for it. But I think, for me, I'd be so inclined to be like, I'm going to play the fighter, and I'm going to really build myself into that trope, and go that way with it.
Yeah, I think definitely. And then if the thing that's stopping your players from wanting to play at low level is that they feel like they won't have enough options, like there are levers that you can pull to give them more options, right? So you could say, okay, we're all going to play level 1, but you all get to choose 3 feats or something like crazy. And then you choose, obviously it's a shorter list of feats. Magic Initiate is one of the examples of feats that aren't in there.
Yeah.
Maybe you cut lucky, maybe you don't. Yeah. Maybe that's a really cool fantasy for your player where they're playing the typical guy. It's just his whole thing is that he's super lucky.
Yeah.
It's that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
That matters in Sword and Sorcery. Maybe he's a gambler or something like that, or
a
gambit style.
I like that idea that all that works. All the feats really matter as well. Give them the option, because it kind of doesn't really matter if you say, the only class you can pick is human, and everyone goes, well, I'll pick variant then and take a feat. But if you're saying, okay, you're going to start with 2 or 3 feats anyway, that means they can build a level 1 character that is a crossbow expert or a weapons master expert and not worry about losing that +1 to every stat because level 1 and 2 are so brutal. So that is a nice way. I mean, you're going to have to think about how you're going to run that game then, and it gives you a little bit of extra math and homework to do when you're balancing and building your encounters, but hey, you're doing that when you get past level 5 anyway, so what's the real difference there?
Yeah, and if you're playing with an experienced group, let's be real, you're not throwing like Cobalt Club generated encounters at your group. They're gonna eat it alive, no matter what level they are. Like if you're playing with flanking, maybe in Sword and Sorcery, you throw flanking in there because everybody's a martial character. It's like, yeah, this is gonna be super war gamey when we get into combat.
If that's then
then you are not building encounters. Vanilla encounters. No. You are being very specific about and very tailored in your encounter building already.
I mean, look, I threw an air elemental at you guys at level 1 last week, so you don't need to tell me that.
And we well, I think it was resistant, right, to magical damage instead of immune. We threw Fairy Fire on it right away because we knew that, like, I think Wes missed Fairy Fire, and then I was like, that's a good idea.
I'll try that too.
We just started spamming Fairy Fire out because it was a single target enemy that we needed to kill, and our highest damage dealers were all our martial characters because they're fairly optimal first level martial characters from like a damage dealing perspective. So right away, we had never played together, or I had never played at level 1 with this group, and we were like, how can we really start pumping up our damage output?
Yeah. And you coped.
Zeroed in on it right away.
I mean, I did nearly kill Sam, but that's just because I wanted to pick on him.
Yeah,
but,
it was clear. You were like, who should I attack this round?
Sam.
Sam. This round, Sam.
But he had the most hit points. It's fine.
I did pick up on that. I was like, Ben doesn't want to track our specific number of hit points. So he knows that he's like pretty safe by going after Sam because you weren't risking taking out our only like healer by going after Sam as well.
I did nearly kill Phoebe Sorcerer. That did nearly happen. That did nearly happen.
You almost had to move out of your house.
Oh yeah, it would have been after all of the character building she'd done. I wouldn't be here today. But it's okay. It's fine. We're good. Everything's fine.
Everything's fine.
But my point is, you can throw those big beefy encounters at level 1 parties if you're running with this kind of rule set. And hey, you can throw in those meat grinder rules as well to really cement in that feeling of, oh, there's no magic to help us live through this.
Definitely.
Maybe just take out resurrection magic. Again, we're talking about.
I mean, if you're playing at low levels, it's not even there.
That's
right?
true. I mean, yeah, but even in NPCs as well, like it's just not an option. It just doesn't exist in the world.
Yeah, that sounds great to me. That sounds very in line with the tone.
This is
of the genre as well.
All of this is like so against my like core. I'm like, I love high fantasy. Yeah. Like, yeah, put me up against beholders and mind flayers, like heavy metal devils and driving through Avernus on war machines. Like, I love all that stuff. But talking about this gets me really excited to play like a really hardcore, like difficult, like Dark Souls D&D. Like what a weird comparison, but like that's what I'm feeling. Interesting question because it's in the back of my mind. Do you class The Witcher as Sword and Sorcery? Because they have sorcerers in The Witcher, they have casters. But when I read the books, especially when you read like the original, like The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny, like those novella short stories, a lot of those feel very Sword and Sorcery, except for like the ones that have a dragon in them, obviously. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so the thing that makes The Witcher not Sword and Sorcery is the thing that makes The Witcher what it is, and that is that The Witcher knows, he knows, he's studied in monster hunting.
Yeah.
Monster hunting as a concept is not like a profession in the Sword and Sorcery genre, right? Yeah. So that's what makes it not. The fact that he isn't just a guy with a sword, like your typical everyday lumberjack who like picks up a sword, and has to go fight against evil. because that's another big part of the genre as well. It's fish out of water. A lot of sword and sorcery stories are like, this person was pulled from our world and dropped into this other planet. The Witcher isn't that, because magic is mundane to The Witcher. It isn't unknown and scary. It is a known entity, and that's what makes it so scary for that world, is they know how scary this stuff is, and they can prepare accordingly.
So it would be fun then for me to, as a DM running Sword and Sorcery, I'd want to put in a character, an NPC that the players can come across that has all of that knowledge. Like, put in that monster hunter, Geralt of Rivia, who then pulls the characters out of their normal lives and says, no, you need to come with me and help me slay this, I don't know, zombie ogre or something. Just something like... But this is the thing, and with the theme, it's not just going to be a zombie ogre. It might be a stat block of a zombie ogre, but it's not. You're not going to describe it that way.
Right.
You know, it's not just, oh, I know what we're fighting. We're fighting a zombie ogre, and it's got X amount of hit points.
Right. It's got to be weird, and you can't. It's got to be unknown. That's the whole thing. It's and then another big part of the genre too is that the heroes that this is like genre defining. The heroes are not heroes. They're typically just trying to get home, or they are motivated by like selfish reasons. They are not generous in any way. Right? They're not going out and fighting monsters to save the village. They're going out and fighting this monster to get something for themselves.
So I just want to go back to the original topic suggestion, just to make sure we are hitting everything here. So I think then this does work in 5e. It just takes a lot of work. Like,
it takes a lot of work, and like, to your point, pulling out all of the races other than humans, people use that as a crutch a lot of the time to be like, my world is diverse. Look, there's a dwarf over here. It's like, the fact that your characters are different races does not make those characters interesting if you've played even like 5 hours of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, because you can walk in a city and there's just like a tabaxi over there, and
right. It's like the first time if you've seen that once, then you're like, oh yeah, they're like, it's like a Halloween parade. You know, it's so you do need to do more work to make this setting actually work talking to your players and making sure it's something that they're excited about. Work for yourself, doing kind of like the background research that's necessary to like not miss something that is like so special to the tone, and a lot of work making your characters interesting in ways that are not your typical kind of just like, oh, I pull this out of the book and it's interesting because of what it is. You really need to kind of you need to write characters and make them interesting.
It's an exercise to improve being a storyteller, I think, and it's one the more we talk about, I really want to do, which is frustrating because I do not have the time. The only other thing I wanted to touch on was magic items as well, because I think there's and really, really quickly, because there are so many magic items, there are so many really great ones, big ones. I think I would be inclined to only have like the common magic items from Xanathar's Guide, and like have them very few and far between as well. Like things like, you find someone and they've got a pipe of smoke monsters. Like, that's like a fun little novelty thing, but it's like, oh my god, it's dark and scary because it's magic and we don't understand it. Like, I mean, grant +1s and things to weapons if they need them, if you're going to level and balance for that, but do it in a non-magical way. Like, oh, they sharpen their sword and they get a +1.
Exactly. Or this is a great opportunity to get really granular. It's like, oh, this is a mastercraft sword. What does that mean? Oh, well, it's not magical, but it gives you a +1 to hit. It doesn't give you a +1 on damage. And all of a sudden, because they're low levels too, these things, they start to covet these things. Yes. It's like you start to pull in weapons that maybe have the bludgeoner feat on them. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh my god, this is powerful. And then your monsters that resist non-magical damage are that much scarier. Because you don't have a spellcaster in the party. And then silvering your weapons is something that you start to look into to do, because like there isn't a +1 sword for sale at like the corner store.
There's a really good DM's Guild product that I use in my games, and I've actually just got you a copy to read through because we're going to be using it in TOA, called, I think it's Heavy Arms. I forget the full name, but it's a system that implements the ability to upgrade and improve standard weaponry, but also there's a runic system to it, so you can add like magic to the items. But the actual core, like, I'm gonna sharpen my sword and I'm going to serrate the edges and I'm going to silver it to make it affect magical creatures, like that kind of system would thrive in Sword and Sorcery, and you can make it work by either putting it in and making the costs a lot cheaper so that it's more accessible to low level characters, or by just having magic items be items that are just improved mundane items.
Right. Yeah, I think that the point here is that your low level D&D doesn't have to be low option.
Yes.
D&D.
That's a great way of putting it. Yes, fantastic. Absolutely, 100%. Oh, dude.
Yeah.
I want to do this now.
Me too. Really
badly. I want to play this game.
I was looking into Sword and Sorcery as like deeply as I could, and I was like, no, another thing that I need to do.
Yeah, and like it's so different as well, because not only am I sitting here like prepping and building a whole campaign guide for Spelljammer, which is so far removed from Sword and Sorcery. I'm now sitting here thinking, holy shit, I could run a Sword and Sorcery game and it would be like meaty and grindy and hardcore.
Right.
And I know there's going to be people who are like, well, if you want to do that way, and you just play this system. And I'm like, yeah, great, but I don't have the time to learn that.
That's a popular
response
rebuttal right now, like on Reddit and stuff like that. That's the go-to. It's like, I'm woke in board games. There are more RPG games than just Dungeons and Dragons. You know,
oh
it's
yeah,
like, yes, but we're not gonna learn them all.
Yeah, like I really want to play the Witcher RPG. I really want to play Cyberpunk Red. Since Joe started talking to me about it like 2 weeks ago, like I want to give that a go. I just don't have the time to not only learn it myself, but learn it for other people and teach other people too.
Right. Like I ran Ryutama for Melissa and her friends, and that was really fun, but it took a long time to be able to like run another system.
Yeah, man. Okay, there's a lot here, and I think the takeaway is absolutely you can go and do this. But you got to put the effort in, and you got to make sure that everybody wants it. I think that's the main takeaway.
Definitely. Everybody's got to be on board.
But do it and tell me about it. I want to know how it goes. You know, I want to know, and I want to play in those games. So,
You don't have the time.
I don't have the time.
You're lying.
I was gonna be like, run one for me, but I know I don't have the time. I have 0 time.
You have no time.
Ray, thank you so much for coming on and having a chat. This has been awakening, because now I know I want to play this game. And I know that you do a lot of this kind of stuff that we're doing right now yourself. So do you want to tell people about that?
Of course, yeah. So Ben actually inspired me and my buddy Ariel to start our own podcast, amateur podcast. So we're a few episodes. Yeah, we're a few episodes behind you guys. We've only come out with about 3 at this point, but we are running off the rails. And you can find us at Running Off the Rails on any of your podcast apps of choice. But we're also findable at runningofftherails.com.
Amazing. Fantastic. Well, go and big up a new show, because, I mean, that's what I needed. That's what Joe and I needed when we started. So go and do that. Go and listen to it and share it, and also share this one, please. Thank you. Ray, thank you so much. If you want to get involved with this show, you can. We Speak Common at hotmail.com is the email. At We Speak Common on Twitter and on Instagram now as well. That is a thing. You can go to wespeakcommon.com to find all of the links for everything, including YouTube, Patreon, where to listen, every single place. It's all on there, and you can find that on the Twitter bio too. And if you want to jump in on the Patreon, you get access to the Discord. You make this continue to happen, and I haven't said it anywhere, but I think today I'm releasing a new character class for Patreon members to grab. So go and see if that's there. Hopefully it will be. Go and have a look. Ray, thank you so much. I will enjoy playing D&D with you tomorrow in the time that we're recording.
Yeah, if your computer works.
Please don't remind me. Okay. See you later, mate.
See you.
Thanks for listening today. If you like the show, do us a favour, leave us a like and review on your platform of choice, and share us with your friends. Send us to your fellow DMs and players so that we can build our community even more. It really helps to get us out in front of more eyes. If you want to support the show, you can by joining our Patreon. Links can be found in the show description and the episode descriptions on all platforms. The music in the podcast is Street Dancing by Timecrawler82. It's licensed under a Creative Commons license by NC. You can find it on the Free Music Archive.